Hey everyone, this is Dave March, and welcome to the 55th episode of The Land of Confusion, where we're finally going to sit down with who we hope to be our 50th guest for Land of Q, our 50th episode. Our most requested returning guest was Boss MONGO, and here he is.
Yeah, and I'm Don Tillman, and I'm going to be. I notice now, looking at the playbacks, I tend to fidget a lot at the very beginning. I don't know why, but I eventually, like 10 minutes in, I get settled. Hi, hello, Boss MONGO.
Buenas tardes. Yeah, I don't fidget, but I've noticed over time that I tend to look this way and that way, so I'm trying to have more eye discipline, and I also tend to close my eyes when I'm trying to think of something, and it drives my wife crazy. She like throws stuff at me, and trying to break me of the habit. So I'll try to have a little more eye discipline. And then before I ran upstairs, she was like, so I don't have an I love me wall, right? I just kind of have like an I love me stack of stuff that I've never gotten around to hanging up. And it's there, but I don't need it. But she was like, you need to put up some of your pictures in the background. I was like, so if you can see it, I put up a couple baseball caps in the background, nice. And I figure that'll work. They're not as cool as Don's guitars, or David's conference room he's got going on. But,
So you recently went off on a little adventure to South America. Can you tell us anything about that? I know you did a big post on it, but
right. So we annually do an exercise called Flexus Commando. And it has two pieces. One is it has a senior leadership seminar where they bring in people at the policy-making level, and they talk about mutual hemispheric threats and countering those. And then we also have the skills competition, which is kind of like a counterterrorism Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. And so we went down, and we're just planning for that, and we're trying to pull it out. But the deck is stacked against us right now, just because the clock's running out, and the fact that we've got to get all this done by the time, before the fiscal year ends, and so it's been, as they say, it's been sporty,
Yeah.
And also, there's some political upheavals going on right now. We got caught in a couple protests. And I put this in the post, but it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. But, they said, we can't have you drive basically from Melgar and Tolomita back up to Bogota. We're going to fly out. Well, the bird was an AN-32. What's the name of that rusty?
Antonov?
Bird. What's that?
The Antonov?
Yes, it was an Antonov 32. Meant to hold about 50 people, and I think we packed about 58 on it because they took all the gringos to fly them all back to Bogota at the same time. So I'm like, let's see. It's a Ruski bird. It's overloaded. We're going from about 2,000 feet above sea level to about 8.8 thousand feet above sea level, and Bogota is surrounded by mountains. We're so gonna die. We're just and hey, we made it, and it all worked out. So I guess. But I said more Hail Marys on that trip than Robert Redford in A Bridge Too Far when he's going across the river. Right? I was there's no way. And the other thing that was funny was they had the little X's and circles on it's basically like bench seating, and they had the little X's, so that you can socially distance while you're on the airplane. And no, they were just packing us in. They're like, come on, we got to get 3 more people in it. It was awesome. But it was a good trip. We'll see. Serious concerns about whether or not we can do the exercise, but I'll do what the government tells me to do. Which, wait a minute, because that's my job, not when I clocked out. So But it was a good time. Great people. I think I've mentioned this before. I just worked with phenomenal people, and it was a good trip. Other than the fact that we're so behind the power crew, and the Colombians are too, because it was supposed to be in Ecuador this year, but Ecuador bowed out because of COVID. And somebody said, "Well, we've done it in Colombia before, so let's push the easy button and go to Colombia." And I'm like, when we do this, there is no easy button for anybody. Even if we did it in the U.S., there's not an easy button. So, but it was a good trip, good time, and good people. So that's all you can ask for when you go to work, right?
Yeah. So I had.
So,
oh, go ahead, Don.
I was going to say, so for those who didn't read the article, this was a military exercise?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. And if you go to the article, and it was just called Trip Report, I put in a little promotional video that back like 2012, when I was still in the military. The reason I got this job is because I had that as my assignment, except I was the boss. I didn't have to do like all the typing and filing and stuff that I'm doing now. But they did a document, or I think it was Telemundo, a company did kind of like a documentary series on it, on the exercise. And so the video that's in there was their promotional video for it. And the reason I wear it out on Ricochet every time I mention the exercise, because it's the most high tech it's going to get. We have some video, but not, the production quality of that. It's the trailer for the series that was shown on Telemundo, and we've got nothing to match that kind of production quality. So I throw it up there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I was talking. So, just a general question. I was talking to a guy who used to be in the U.S. Army, and he's lives in my building, and he was asking me, "Is the Seer School still in Panama, or has it been moved somewhere more like to Colorado because it's been in Afghanistan for the last 20 years?"
Right. No. So the Seer School's never been in Panama, but we used to have a jungle school in Panama.
Okay.
And I don't think that we have a jungle school anymore.
Okay.
Now the Seer School almost kind of, because there's so much oversight, the Seer School almost has to be within CONUS, because the stuff we do to people, the way we're legally allowed to do it is it counts as human experimentation. and so when you do human experimentation, apparently you have to follow rules, right? So
I just hired went to China and hired scientists to do the work for you, so you wouldn't have to worry about these lousy rules.
Yeah. So no, but the Seer School is still going strong, and I'm still have some light touch points with the people there at Seer School, and they're still. Like I said, it's just a great. The thing is, yeah, okay, it might make you a better soldier. And this is Seer, the school I was at, because everybody gets like Seer level A, which is basically code of conduct training. I am a member of my country's armed services, and if I'm captured, I'll give name, rank, service number, and date of birth. And then Seer level B is kind of the survival part of it. But the Seer level C that actually has the captivity scenarios, that's the part that counts as human experimentation, and that's for people that are high risk, not only high risk of capture, but also high risk of exploitation, right? Because think about it, if the adversary rolls up a U.S. serviceman and the kid's a light wheel mechanic, not going to get a lot of mileage out of that.
Yeah.
But if they roll up a U.S. serviceman and that cat's a ranger or an SF guy or part of a LoC or something, a lot of mileage they can get out of that. So it's to teach the people that not only might have a higher likelihood of getting rolled up, but also a higher likelihood of having them try to exploit that service member once they're in a captivity scenario.
I wonder what the paperwork is like for the for things classified as human experimentation.
It, so for our school, they had Nick Rowe, and if you ever, his book was 5 Years to Freedom, and I don't think he explicitly says this in the book, but he was rolled up in Vietnam, and he was 5 years of POW in the most awful circumstances you can imagine.
Yeah.
And then because he was so intransigent, they were taking him out to execute him. And he reduces his guard, which basically means he killed his guard, because he heard a helicopter going overhead, and he ran out into an open field. After 5 years, Colonel Rowe was not in uniform. He was in black silk jammy jams, just like the Viet Cong were. So he ran out in the field, and the helicopter almost gunned him down, except for they noticed that he had a significant amount of facial hair. And a Viet couldn't grow facial hair like that. So they swooped him up, and he got out, and then he was brought in by Special Forces to start the Seer School in 1981, I think, 1980 or 1981. And because of all the paperwork and because of all the certifications and everything else, I want to say the school went live on being able to conduct a full up level C at 1986. So it took that long just to get everything right and to get the level of training for all of the instructors and everything else. And then more than a couple times, because he was a poster boy for opposing communism, more than a couple times, the communist bloc, if you will, went after Nick Rowe. And there's a couple times they had to go in and pull him out of wherever he was serving. And, because he was foreign countries. And they'd be like, you got to go because they're going to assassinate you. And then they pulled him, I think, out of Greece. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they pulled him out of Greece, and then he was finally assassinated in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
Years later, like he had come to West Point and spoke when I was a plebe. So I think he was killed sometime like 1987 or 1989, somewhere in between there. But just 5 Years to Freedom is an amazing book, and this guy just went through a lot over the course of those 5 years.
Wow.
Real missing in action too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, yeah. He's the real guy, right? Yeah. He's the guy that did that. So, and it's funny. There was a guy, and I'm sorry, I'm going into war story mode. So tell me.
No, that's what the show's for.
This is a good story. There was a guy that worked at a Seer School when I was there. Command Sergeant Major retired Nail, and Nail had been Nick Rowe's team sergeant, and he'd gotten medevac before the fight where Nick Rowe got rolled up, and he was telling me one time, we were waiting the next day, we were scooping up all the Seer students so they could begin the fun part of the course. They were all out on evasion, and we're sitting around the fire and we're drinking corn liquor out of mason jars, right? And he was like, sir, don't ever let the enemy blow your guts out, because once they do, they never go back in the right way. And he had gotten caught in a near ambush in Vietnam, and was blown up against a termite, one of the termite mounds that they had. And he was like, why am I engaging targets and I can still see to shoot, but I'm also looking at the termites kind of eating my guts? And it was because the overpressure had blown one of his eyes out, and it was just hanging by the ocular nerve.
Wow.
And a whole long story.
Jeez.
And he got medevac to a trauma hospital in Japan, and the doctor came in when he was finally like out of surgery, and the doctor was like, "Hey, I'm sorry you lost your eye. That's $1 million wound." And Neil's like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you're going home. You're medically retired now." And he's like, "I don't think so, doc." So he waits until, the dark of night, steals a young airman's uniform out of his locker, goes to the airfield, and basically hitchhikes on flights back to his team in Vietnam. And nobody would have ever known except for because he was unaccounted for in a hospital. He was obviously AWOL. And if you go 90 days AWOL, you get dropped from the roll.
Mhm.
And so he'd been DFR'd, and his wife hadn't gotten the paycheck. And she wrote him and said, "Hey, knucklehead, I don't know what you're pulling, but we got a no pay due this month. You've got it." And that's when he came up, and they were like, "Yeah, no, Sergeant Major, really, he was a master sergeant at the time. Master, you really have to go back." And so this guy worked with me, and we have a urban obstacle course, and it's basically 2 grain silos, stone grain silos, and the roofs have fallen in, and they're full of water. And so it's kind of like we teach the students to negotiate the obstacles. Like, you got to run around the perimeter of one of the grain silos, and then, commando crawl across a rope bridge to the other one. Just a bunch of stuff that Sergeant Major retired Nail used to demonstrate to the students when I was there in 2000, 2001. And so here's this guy that looks and walks like a punch-drunk boxer with only one eye, and he's up high on this thing, running around the perimeter. And I was talking to the NCOIC of that particular phase of the course. I was like, "Hey, Mitch, should he be up there doing that?" "Nope." "Why don't you tell him he can't demonstrate anymore?" "Nope." "Sir, if you want him to stop demonstrating, you tell him." "I'm not going to tell him. He scares me." So just a great guy, and it was a great experience for me personally working there, because whatever skills it gave the soldiers that went there, it produces great Americans. When you come out of that school, you're like, "Yeah, okay, I got it now. I'm proud to be a citizen of this country." So
Yeah.
Great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah, it reminds me of I was reading about this guy. I'm sure if I looked up his name, you'd know it, but he was like in Vietnam, and he got shot down, and like got killed like 20 enemies that day. Got shot multiple times, kept going back for his buddies to put him on the helicopter. And he's still,
one of the stories show, one of the things we tell people, and this is good across the board, is when you get in a difficult situation, particularly if you get in a survival or an evasion situation, what you have to do is right there figure out what is your reason to live. And there was one guy that got shot up and spent more than, I believe, it's been a while since I've read the vignette, but spent more than 2 weeks basically crawling 90 kilometers to get back to where he knew U.S. forces were. And the thing that motivated him and that kept him moving, even though he was shot up and in the jungle and all alone, was right before his patrol went out, he'd gotten a Dear John letter. And he hadn't had the chance to change over his life insurance or his paycheck or anything else. He's like, "Oh no." So this dude lived and crawled through that much jungle just out of spite. There's no way she is getting my policy. So, but you got to have a reason, and you got to figure it out. And then you say, "Okay, this is why I will stay alive."
Yeah. I remember reading about an Italian doctor who was captured in Stalingrad by the Russians. And he said he looked around at a lot of people and he knew they were all going to die. My internet's going off. But he knew he wanted to get back to Italy no matter what. And he survived like 10 years in the Stalags to get back home.
Right. The things, and it helps to study that stuff, just so you know, because I think it helps, just so you know, it is hard to kill human beings. It's amazing what they live through. It's amazing what they can endure. It's amazing the kind of damage they can soak up and be okay. Not okay as one can be, I guess. But it's just and so knowing that, hey, I think there's a T-shirt. You can tell. I always wear the motivational T-shirts, and but there's one that says from one company, I forget which one, but it says "Be hard to kill," and I can sign on to that T-shirt.
So we've been looking around a little bit. We've been having a number of people coming on to the show lately, and they were very concerned about the future of America after the election loss. How do you feel about what do you think seeing out there is going on with the BLMs and Antifas? And we talked a bit about them last time you were on the show.
Right. I also am very concerned with where we're going. But I am an optimist, and I think now this is a big if. But if the Republican Party learns its lessons and can provide election integrity, I think these nut jobs that we have up there right now are going to overreach, as they are prone to do when they have power, and and we will begin fighting our way back to a position where it's not just one party rule. And with the Antifa and the BLM, and look where they're right. It's all in blue cities, blue states. And if the Republicans don't leverage that and say, this is what this kind of governance leads to, and I tend to think that sooner than later, geopolitically outside the borders of this country, something similar is going to happen where one of our adversaries does something egregious and our administration basically does nothing, just like the Democrats in all these blue cities are doing nothing. I think it'll be a stark comparison to be made. Whoever, and I think we have a decent shot at changing the composition of the legislature in 2022, and then we'll see what happens in 2024.
Okay.
I sort of think that has gone by already. They've overreached, I think, and we haven't done anything really.
Right. But see, the thing is, Don, is you're smart and you're well read and you have common sense, so you can see overreach. It's just for the knucklehead that is prone to vote Democrat, that's the person that has to see them as overreaching,
Yes, certainly. In terms of the voters, yes, in terms of voters, but the mechanism of the party, the organization of the party, the organization of government bureaucracies, all that is just it's grown crooked as can be, and that's overreached. And it's a tough situation.
I think the recent revelations coming out of that Vanity Fair article about Fauci and his, what would be the right word, his agency brethren, and the fact that Dr. Redfield at one point in that article was saying, I was getting death threats for saying it might have originated in the lab. I think that's a great, you can pick so many great examples of where our bureaucracy, whether you call it the deep state or the establishment or whatever, you can pick out so many examples of where they've just gone off the rails. You've got the whole Fauci thing, which is there, and I know on Ricochet it's a self-selected audience, but there is probably nobody that's going to watch this that didn't think it came out of the lab in the first place. Because I know I was like, what do you mean a wet market? They got not just one, but two virology, labs there, and they do gain of function experiments. Wet market, what, pangolin, what, who the hell? And I didn't know that it was that big of a controversy to say it probably came out of the lab until this story broke. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but now all the websites are saying, like Tom Cotton and all the reporting on what he was saying, and them saying, oh, it's a debunked conspiracy theory. I must have missed that. because that would have been a great, great opportunity for me to just blow my stack right there. Again, it's right there. I mean, could there be an outside itsy bitsy teeny tiny sliver of a percentage of a chance that it came out of a wet market? Yes. But you got 2 virology labs right there. Come on.
Yeah, it's like an outbreak breaking out in Atlanta.
Right, in Atlanta, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some other places that they're doing it. But if you have a U.S., whether it's government entity or contracted out, as dangerous as it is, and as much as I am not convinced I see the logic behind doing gain of function experimentation or studies or whatever they call it, you can't put it, the performance of those kind of experiments in the U.S., you cannot compare and contrast to the way they're going to do it in a communist country. It's literally apples and oranges. And I think, did you guys see? I think it was 2017. A couple guys from the State Department went through it and they published their concerns. They went through the Wuhan lab, or the Wuhan Virology Institute, and they published their concerns, internally. But it was open source stuff, and they're like, yeah, this is just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody did anything, so the accident happened.
At least when
So,
go ahead.
What happened? I think what happened. So recently, that we have these release of the emails, of the Fauci emails, and I think that blew it open, and to a certain degree, and so it's almost as if we have people who are in on it, and people who are not. And there's this line between the two. Is that right?
I don't know, because I mean, all bureaucracies to some extent are corrupt. We know that. That's a function of a bureaucracy. And all bureaucracies have as their primary agenda sustaining and expanding that bureaucracy. I would say, and this is why I'm saying I don't know, is because what I would say is, given that, I think the military departments are the best of our bureaucracy. And it has nothing to do with the function of bureaucracies as much as it does when you're working at the Pentagon, or, in my life down in Tampa at SOCOM or whatever. All the guys that are doing that came up through the force. And they all know that everything they do, even though they're corrupt, but they all have that conscience left that says everything I do affects the soldier on the ground. Everything they're doing should be, frequently isn't, but should be helping the sons and daughters of America that are out on the ground. And there's that. And then there's also that we're like the only part of the bureaucracy where there's no time card. You work, if you see a military daily schedule, whether it's in the bureaucracy or with a unit, it'll usually say something like from 1630 or starting at 1700 or 1800. After you're done with all your scheduled tasks, it says UTC, Uniform Tango Charlie, and that means until task completion. So if you finish that task at 1900, good to go. Go home, see mama. If you can't get the task finished until 2300, it's nobody blinks an eye. That's just part of the job. So as opposed to, I think, other parts of bureaucracy where it's 8 hours a day, unless you're authorized overtime, and there's no ranks to come up. There's no troops or no familial or filial kind of association with the people you're working for. OSHA, what does that guy care? Maybe there's a guy in OSHA that had his dad lose his hand in a sawmill, but
Yeah, it's not
right. And in any kind of bureaucracy like that, we see the incentives for graft and corruption and bribery exist. And I think that's the reason those incentives are there. And if you could find a way to get rid of those incentives, well, military does, you win. But the incentives are plainly there.
Right. And I think it's more likely than not that a lot of these guys don't view themselves as pros,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and think about it. If you spend the time to go through medical school and you become a doctor and get a job at, you know, the CDC or the allergies and infections place that Fauci's part of, even if you're doing some squirrely stuff, nobody sees them as the bad guy in the movie of their own mind, right? Mm-hmm. And Fauci has said, I would be irresponsible if I wasn't supporting the conduct of gain-of-function experiments. Well, the Congress told you no. And when the Congress tells you no, you're not allowed to give a grant to a private sector corporation and then have them go pay to have your experimentation done in China. You know, I'm sure, because I'm not a Fauci fan, but I'm sure in his little weak-willed, bureaucratic, hardest thing he's ever done is straighten out a paperclip way. I'm sure he thought he was working for the greater good. And if all those blinkered and benighted members of the legislature that prevented it, you know, couldn't be reasoned with, then he was going to find a workaround.
Right.
And here we are.
Yep.
You know, and let me say, as a former member of a bureaucracy, I was kind of the king of workarounds, right? So I'm not, you know, one of the things I used to say is, within obvious certain moral, ethical, legal, and policy left and right limits, I used to, you know, one of my big things I would tell my guys all the time is use precise terms precisely, because what you do is not as important as how you talk about it. So just to take a very, you know, generic example, when you go out and you train indige in another country, you know, and you've spent 3 or 6 or 8 or 12 weeks with these guys and just doing outstanding training. The last day, you're not allowed to buy, depending on where you're at, a pig or a cow or a couple goats to have a nice end of mission party for the guys and cook up all that meat. However, you can have the last block of instruction you're going to be conducting to be the desanguination and dressing of a large animal. And then once you're done with the block of instruction, we get it. You're not going to just throw the meat away. You know, so there are workarounds. There are also things that are, you know, where you got to know. No, I'm not. You know, and that's the other part about the military, because you get used to being told to do things you don't want to do, or that you don't think are necessarily the right way to do. And it's your responsibility. You know, if you're a young lieutenant, you go into the captain's office. If you're a young captain, you go into the major's office. You go in and you close the door, and you can yell and scream and kick his trash can and everything. And sometimes I go, yeah, hey, Mongo, I listened to you and you're right. And sometimes I'll go, I heard everything you said. Now go out and do what I told you to do. Mm-hmm. And it is your professional obligation to go out and do that as though perform as though you thought that was the best order you ever received, and you couldn't wait to do it, even though you're like, oh, this is going to be such a no-road. But it doesn't matter. You do what and I think other bureaucracies within our government don't have that ethic, you know?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Oh, yeah. And I mean, odds are those bureaucracies were staffed by their buddies. You know,
well, you also have
political connections. Yeah.
Another problem is, have you read Unrestricted Warfare by the two Chinese colonels?
I have not. I've read articles about it, but
basically the Chinese have spent the last 20 years trying to infiltrate everything, and including our health services. So they have been like, they have, you've heard of your sister city programs, and sometimes you have sister cities that are in
Right.
China. That's part of like Chinese trying to influence your local municipal officials, flying them to China, whining and dining them. And they've done that with the health departments. They've done it with everything because they want to amplify their ability to affect things. And they did that with like the World Health Organization. So when this happened, they had all these very sympathetic people in the American and the international bureaucracies who they've wined and dined and who don't want to have problems with China come forth because that's part of the Chinese strategy.
Because it's a good deal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at, did you see, I've lost eye discipline. I know I shouldn't be looking down in a way.
Yeah, that's okay.
But the John Cena apology,
Yeah.
you know, the steroid creature that's in Fast and Furious 9, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one I saw was Fast and Furious 1. And it was so disjointed. It was, to me anyway, it was literally like, I couldn't understand anything that was going on because there really was no story. It was just, you know, we're going to say some cool lines here or there, and we're going to race cars. I've never watched any of them, so, but I heard his apology, and I'm like, yeah, hey man, you're an American, you know, you should, and I think it's a good exemplar across like our corporate leadership, our bureaucratic leadership, like you were saying, David, about the you know, the being infiltrated and the good deal that you get as a bureaucrat if you're working with China. But I just want to tell them, hey brother, you're an American. You don't lick anybody's boots. It doesn't happen, you know. And if something you say upsets the Chinese, then the only appropriate answer is, all right, got it, get over it, you know. But I guess,
well, I think in this case, he was working for a Chinese business. I mean, they were paying a salary.
No, what happened is he's in a movie that's trying to make it big in China, and basically, unfortunately, maybe he went into his executive producer's office in the movie and screamed and said, "I don't want to do this," and the guy said, "You have to do this, or you're not getting paid."
right.
It's entirely possible.
Mm-hmm.
They would have to pay him, but they were probably freaking out. So because I can see how this kind of conversation goes. Number one, you've got to cut up the film because you're one of the stars, and the cut is going to be much, much smaller if we don't get the Chinese market, and they will boot. And then on top of that, so not only are you going to get the payday you would have gotten, but you ain't going to work in this town again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to think of, I don't know anything about Hollywood or entertainment, but I can't think of anybody that would blow off the Chinese anywhere. And if the Chinese said, we don't want this guy to work, then you're done.
Yeah, it's starting to change because even Hollywood's getting is finding out that China doesn't actually want their movies. They just wanted to learn how to do it. China's deciding to steal everyone's stuff. And so they've kind of suckered people into China. And now they're like, okay, well, we don't like your movies. Now we don't have to cater to you anymore. Get the hell out.
Well,
I think they own a number of the production houses, right?
Not exactly.
What's that?
No?
What happened for a while, Paramount especially was a movie theater that was getting a lot of money from China. And then China recently cut down because of all the money Paramount was losing from their movies. China, like the last Star Trek movie is like, okay, you're not allowed to invest your money in American movies anymore. They cut that off because they were losing too much.
Okay, but it was for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and then they ruined, I mean, if you think about it, I think from an artistic point of view, when they did the remake, the reboot of Red Dawn, and China was like, oh, it can't be us, so it ended up being North Korea. And it's like, oh yeah, that's entirely freaking plausible. You know, that North Korea is just, you know, this country that where all the people are starving. Yeah, they secretly got, you know, echelons of core level units ready to drop in and take over America. Okay, and that,
well, not just that, when they made the change and they went to release the movie at the last minute, China said, "Oh, we're not going to let you release this movie in our country."
Right, and so they oops, you know, record stretch and recut, and all of a sudden it's North Korea. But my thing is, and this goes to show what it's like working with dummy communists, is what kind of propaganda coup could it have been if the Chinese had just let that roll, but with just a little bit of nuance and a little bit of, you know, both America could have walked out feeling good, and the Chinese audience could have walked out feeling good. You know, it kind of like, yeah, we kicked your butt, and then the only reason we left is because we're humanitarian, you know, because we can. So, you know, I think for China that was probably an opportunity missed, but I don't know. I'm not a paranoid commie, you know, bureaucrat again. So I don't know how their little minds work.
Well, in the movie, in the Amazon series, was it the Man in the High Castle? That does happen a bit. It's not China, it's Japan. Occupying most, and they end up having to have a Vietnam-style exit.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I've heard about it.
Yeah.
I'm the worst, man. I don't play any video games. I'm not watching any shows right now. I haven't seen a movie in forever.
Same here.
Yeah.
I know how you feel. Same here. Exactly.
Well, it's funny, and tell me what you guys, because David, I know you're a gamer, right? And Don, I know you play it, but it kind of seems like I go through my days, and then at the end of them, you know, I go to bed, and I go to work the next day, and these guys are talking about, oh, I saw this movie, I saw this show, did you see this on SportsCenter? And I'm like, where do you guys get the time to do this? You know, and I mean, I know I read a lot, but I don't understand when you listen to all of the, you know, all of the content that people absorb. Like even, for example, even this show, I've got to just listen to it, you know, because I don't have usually the time to sit down and dedicate an hour, you know, just sit there and watch the computer. So I just put it on the earbuds and roll, you know. Although what I will do is I'll watch like the first 5 or 10 minutes, especially if it's someone I've never seen before, that's on Ricochet, just so that I can match kind of the picture with the narrative voice that I hear when I read whatever that person wrote. But
excellent. Yeah.
You know, there's
another purpose of the show.
What's that? Oh yeah,
yet another purpose of the show.
But yeah, I just don't know. Either I'm doing something very, very right, or I'm doing something very, very wrong. But you know, I just don't. It just now, and I've got a couple personal things going on. That means I am running right now, you know, a marathon at a wind sprint pace. But I'm just wait. You guys are sitting there comparing notes. I got these 2 buddies that sit, you know, on the other side of the little prairie dog, you know, bullpen that we're in. And it's not that they're following one show. It's that they're following like 5 or 6 or 7 shows. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're both married. You both have kids. What the hell? I said, either you're screwing it up or I'm screwing it up. One of the two. So
I feel exactly the same way. I've got my day job's a high-tech startup company, and got all these projects on the side, and yeah, time's completely filled up.
Yeah.
So I also do not watch movies or television.
I have a lot of movies and TV to watch because there's not much else to do right now in Canada because it's everything's pretty much against the law.
Yeah, see, I'm in Florida, so it's kind of like, you know, wait, Cove, what? What was that thing called? It's actually funny down here. Not funny, but remarkable in the sense of worthy of remark that I'll go to the Publix down now. So I work up in Homestead, and then drive down to the Keys every day and live down the Keys. Publix is our big, I guess Kroger's or whatever. It's our big grocery store chain. Winn-Dixie, Piggly Wiggly. But ours is Publix. And when I stop by the Publix after work every now and then, that's in Homestead, 100% everybody in there is wearing a mask. Okay, go along to get along. And I stop in there. I know you guys will be shocked, but every now and then you got to have a road soda to make that long commute with, right? So I'll go in there and buy a beer and then leave, and 100% mask. But then I get home and because I'm a moron, hadn't looked at my text before I left, and see that my lovely and talented wife has said, "Hey, pick up, A and B so I can make dinner." And okay, so then I'll go to the Publix down here in the Keys, 100% open faces, no mask. And then one thing I noticed today, because I wanted to make sure I had enough beers to sustain me until we started this podcast. Not too many beers, but enough beers. Is what's interesting with here is on just like a weeknight, no mask that I see in a grocery store. On the weekend, because we're a tourist town, like this just this morning, all kinds of people wearing masks. But there is no, at least I haven't seen yet, any friction between people that are wearing masks and aren't wearing masks. It kind of works. But
that sounds a lot like how it is here outside. Like half the people are wearing masks, half the people aren't. No one gives anyone trouble.
Right. Yeah. I have not seen this Karen phenomena that everybody's talking about. Everybody I engage with or share space with, everybody seems to be pretty civil.
Yeah, a couple cases here, but no. I'll point out that I as an observation, everybody I know who lives in Florida always mentions their Publix supermarket by name. It's just they love their Publix supermarket.
Yeah. Well, people down here love Publix, but the thing is Publix loves the people back. That's why they've got such strong loyalty here. It really is a good, and the other thing is it's publicly owned, but whenever they do whenever they're going to sell more shares, or do a stock split or anything like this, Publix employees get the first bite at the apple.
Okay, nice.
So there's people making a very good living because every time there's been a stock offering, the employees get the first shot at it, and a lot of them take it. But yeah, Publix is really, it's almost kind of old school, as far as it believes in community and years and years ago, seems like not that long ago, but when I retired from the military, I did some private security stuff that had kind of an international portfolio to it, and kind of figured out two things very quickly. Now you got to remember, this was at the nadir of the Obama economy, right? So there weren't no jobs. But I figured out that doing that kind of stuff was kind of sketchy once you were no longer in uniform,
Yeah.
And number two is I figured these guys are trying to get me killed, and at this point and at that point when it was, I had nothing to prove, I could go my whole life without ever having to employ a firearm against somebody or commit any act of violence. I'm good. I have, no internal requirement to get my gun on to kind of figure out what's the measure of a man type thing that you have with the younger kids. But I was just like, I'm not doing it. So, but because of all my certifications and licensing, I went to work for G4S.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I went to work for them is they promote from within. So they don't bring in a guy to be the CEO of, the South Florida district. They promote from within. And I was like, all right. But they tell you up front, you're going to spend 2 or 3 years in the 305 area code. You're either going to be an armed guard at a Publix, or you're going to be out at the dump. Only 2 options. And so I did. I'm trying to think. I think it was about 6 months. I was, a rent-a-cop in a grocery store, and it was funny. One of my daughters was like, who at the time was working as a med tech, and right now she's working as a nanny, and was kind of a model for the short story I wrote, The Nanny. But she's like, Dad, what are you doing? I'm making more than you. And I was like, hey, baby doll, man's got to work. You got to work. Finding another job or finding a better job or getting promoted in this country, that stuff I'll do on my own time. But you've got to work. But I will say, one, I thoroughly enjoyed getting kind of to know Miami, doing that rent-a-cop job. And two was, I will tell you, those kids at Publix bust their ass. I mean, you can talk about whatever it is now. I'm not millennials, but Generation Z or whatever, whoever, the teenagers to mid-20 kids are. Because when that store closes at night, they've got 1 hour to recock it so it can open up again at 7 in the morning. And those kids just expend an enormous amount of calories, and they do the job right, and there's no bitching or moaning or anything. So it was, it was good for me to have that crappy job. But yeah, Publix is a big part of Florida, especially South Florida.
Cool. Well, we've been talking about an hour here, and you know what? That seems like a good note to go out on, like kind of the tour de force.
And thank you, David, for saying we've been talking for about an hour. I don't know what pulled my string today, but I've been, I've been on a roll. And I'm sorry for not.
No. You're the guest. We want to hear from you. That's what the regulars can hear us anytime because we're on all the shows. So it's good to have someone talk to us.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great coming back, and I don't care what all the other Ricochet say about you guys. I think you're squared away.
Sounds all right. Good. Okay. And with that, I think that was a great way to end the show. So we'll see you guys later in the comments.
All right, gentlemen. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
You too. Bye.